Everyone, and thank you for coming out early in the morning to join us today for this event. Thank you also to those who are online. I hope that we're all set online and people are able to join us. So, well, we are 100 years old as a business school, and this is an exciting time for us. And there have been many events going on throughout the year, and today and tomorrow are the main capstone events. So today we are focusing on our faculty research and showcasing what our people have been working on, what their expertise are, and hopefully hoping to make connections between people. Some of the reasons we do some of these events like this is to have connections between people so you can know what people are working on and connect with them. Today we have 3 panels planned. This is the first one in the morning at 10 o'clock, and hopefully we'll get more people as the day goes ahead. But we have 3 panels planned for you. And there are 70 people, 17 of our top scholars will be discussing their research and what they've been working on and how they have been impacting the world. So you are in for a good treat. And if you are not right here, right now, you can, of course, watch the recording later on. But for those who are here, you have the opportunity to ask questions and have them answered in real time. So we have 3 panels, as I mentioned. One will be focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation. That will be the first panel. And of course, we all know that the world doesn't progress without innovation. If we don't innovate, there will be no progress in the world. And we have a very good group of scholars who study that and how to create new enterprises, manage new enterprises, and ensure that we keep innovating and moving on as a society. We also have a panel on Fintech and Data Analytics. Now, I know that a lot of you have heard about ChatGPT and all of the things that is going on in the world. That is not exactly the same thing as what the panel will be talking about, but related to that. We have fintech, a lot of things going on, people trying to figure out the ways to make technology work for the advantage and for the benefit of society, especially when it comes to financial progress, financial liberalization, and catering for people who may not otherwise have access to financial services. So the second panel will be focusing on that. And the final panel will be focusing on international business. The world, as they say, is a global village, and there is a lot of interconnection going on. We have many people studying that. How do we make sure that these interconnections between different countries, different companies work well? How do we manage the different cultural issues that arise when you have people moving across countries? So we have the third panel that will be focusing on that. And later on, we have also been hiring in some of these areas to demonstrate our commitment to these areas. Now, as I mentioned, we have 3 panels, but those are not the only areas where we focus on where we do research in the business school. There are many other areas in all of our different groups that we do a lot of different things that are exciting and interesting. Anyway, so we are still hiring people. Last year, we hired 8 fantastic tenure track faculty joining us that started this year. And for next year, we already hired 5 people, tenure track, and we're still in the process of hiring more people. So we are growing, and we are recruiting and hiring exciting faculty who will help us to keep on growing our research enterprise in these areas. At this point, I'm going to have Emery come on, and Emery is our dean, and they will make a few comments, and then I will come back and introduce the panel. Thank you, Emery.
Thanks, Bhumi. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think Bhumi's done a great job putting together, as he said, this isn't everything we do in DeMoore McKim, but when you cover entrepreneurship, global, and kind of fintech data analytics, it's a good chunk of what we do in DeMoore McKim. I've been here 35 years, and along with everything else, it's really great to see the progress we've made with the faculty and the research and the quality of the research being done by our faculty. But it's really, I think, kept pace with where the university is going and where we want to go, and it's great to see the research that we're doing today. I want to talk just briefly a little bit more generally from the dean's perspective, and I see Greg Abode is here, the dean of the College of Engineering, and we spend a lot of time together, all the deans, talking about research, and we do want to continue doing high-quality research in business and engineering, I think in all of the disciplines, but we also want to do more collaborative interdisciplinary research that, in line with the university's plans, it solves problems in the world, right? And there's, as Bhumi said, there's a lot going on there with joint faculty hires and and so on. And it's great. I don't know, my brain is getting older, and I'm not sure I know everyone in DeMoor McKim, but I think I know pretty much all the faculty. And I see some people here who are not familiar faces, so it's great to see some faculty here, and I expect we'll see more coming and going throughout the day from the other colleges. And this is a great event to network, not just with our faculty in DeMoor McKim, but across the university. But that interdisciplinary research is certainly an important priority for all of the deans and for the university. And I think, in business, we can serve a role as being somewhat of a connector, right? A connective tissue to, connect other colleges in the university with business. And, just some of the things we're talking about with the deans, getting research out into Oakland and London and the network, but like, AR, VR, health, data, data analytics, data quality, humane use of data, and so on are all things that we do here in DeMoor McKim. There are also I know Bhumi's talked about this, the university is investing in the impact engines. I think Tucker has one of the first impact engines working with faculty from COE, and we certainly are interested in more of those, and I would encourage you to work with Bhumi, talk to me, take a look at the process for proposing an impact engine, but that's a good way to get funding for research and to get interdisciplinary research going. I know the Tier 1 process is going on now as well, and we have some submissions for the Tier 1 grant process that connects with other colleges. So I think that's all good. Again, I think we want to continue to see good, top quality, impactful business research, but broadening it out and connecting with other disciplines. And the other thing is more research funding. We are not a huge target for research funding for the university, but that is growing, and we would like to grow with it. And it's not the norm for business faculty to be looking for outside funding for research, but I think we want to be more of a player there, and I think some of these interdisciplinary opportunities are good ways to connect business faculty with increasing our amount of external funding for research. So with that, thank you, Bhumi. Thank you for being here, and I hope this will be a good day of networking, and some of this will continue. I know some of our panels today will continue to bring out what they're doing to share at the event tomorrow night, the signature event with some of our alumni and Board of Trustees members and a broader audience. So it's a good week for DeMoor McKim on our 100th, but thank you.
Thank you, Emery. So now to the business of the day. We have our first panel, which is going to be on entrepreneurship and innovation. The moderator of the panel is Fernando Suarez. Fernando is the pardon me, I went to school in Canada, so sometimes I see Jean, I call it John because I want to pretend I'm French, but I'm not. So Fernando is the Jean C. Temple Chair in Entrepreneurship, and it does work in entrepreneurship, but specifically, it does a lot of work on innovation and technology strategy, entry, timing strategies, standard and dominant designs, industry evolution, platform competition, and the role of services in product firms. Fernando is a well-published and well-cited scholar. He's published in all of the top journals. Name them, yes, name it is published in it. Academy of Management Journal, Academy of Management, Strategic Management Journal, Management Science, Research Policy, Operations Research, name it, Fernando has got it covered. And we are very lucky to have Fernando here. He also serves as the group chair of our Entrepreneurship and Innovation group. For those of you who are not in the DeMoor McKim School of Business, we don't have departments, but the group chairs are basically the same thing as department chairs. So he carries a lot of service responsibilities and at the same time keeps on doing a lot of good work in his research. So it's my pleasure to welcome Fernando to the podium and get the panel started.
Thank you so much, Bhumi. Thank you so much, Emery. This is really a pleasure to be here. Yes, I've been here for 7 years now. 6 of them have been a group chair, and it's actually interesting that I've been lucky also, very lucky to help in small or bigger ways to hire 3 of the people that we have in our panel here. So I'm super glad to have that. Let me introduce the panel. I mean, I think we have a great set of panelists today. I'm going to go by alphabet, just in alphabet order. So Stina Grodal is with us today here. She's the second one here. If you can raise your hand so that people know you. I mean, although most of them do know you. She's a professor in the E&I group, and she has a PhD from Stanford University in management science and engineering. Her research actually explores the socio-cognitive aspects of industries, and I should say she's probably one of the most well-known qualitative scholars in our field today. I think that's not an exaggeration. Just a couple of weeks ago, they had this online seminar that was attended for more than 1,000 people, actually, and she's really a big name in the field. Then we have here on my right, Laura Wang. She's actually a professor in the MOD group. She's that's the Management and Organizational Development group, for those of you that do not know what MOD is. She has a PhD from the University of California in Irvine, and also she's an engineer by training, with 2 degrees in engineering before the degree in management. Her research explored the role of intuition and signaling in the decision makers of managers and entrepreneurs. She has actually does quite a bit of research in entrepreneurship, so I think I should say this because we have already sort of an internal agreement that she will be a joint appointment between at the MOD group and our group. She has got several recognitions, actually, including from the Academy of Sciences and Poets and Quants, so she's a very highly visible and very productive scholar. Then third on my right here, we have Samina Karim. She's a professor also in the E&I group. She has a PhD from University of Michigan in strategy. And her research focuses really on acquisition and alliances and corporate restructuring and the organizational design changes that come with those strategies that try to get companies to be more innovative. She is very well known in the fields of innovation and strategy. In fact, she was actually, until last year, I think she was the chair of the strategic management division in the Academy of Management, which is the largest grouping of scholars in our field. And then finally, I have Tiger Marion, which is, we did all the ladies first, but it's actually because of alphabet, okay, so you're there. So Tiger is actually an associate professor with our group. She's been a wonderful colleague. In fact, he and I shared the chairship of the group several years ago. He's also a joint appointment with the College of Engineering, so Greg, thanks a lot for being here. He's really an amazing colleague. He has a PhD from Penn State University in industrial engineering. And his research really is a deep dive into the product development process for both startups and corporations. Tiger is a boundary spanner. He spans several boundaries between management and actually engineering and computer science. And as Emir mentioned, he's one of our few, I think probably the one or two members in the McKim who is actually leading one of these impact engines. So we're very proud of that. So that's it. I will give them, I said 2 minutes to complete what I said, because it's actually so unfair when one tries to summarize, people who are very accomplished. So 2 minutes for each of you to expand on what I just said on you and add something that you think is relevant for the panel. And then I'll start with questions. And then the story is, I will ask questions for about 20 minutes with their responses. And then we'll open it up for the last 20 minutes for your questions and answers. And if there are no more questions, I will probably have more questions for them. All right, Laura, please get us started.
Okay, I thought we were going in alphabetical order. I wasn't yet prepared. No. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I'm Laura Huang. I'm new to the university, so I've been here now for 2 months. So I joke that I'm 2 months old. And as Fernando mentioned, I study intuition and perceptions, signals, cues in the decision-making process. So I look at environments and contexts where there's extreme uncertainty, and I look at the role. Am I too loud? I'm fine. Okay. Yeah. I look at the role of intuition and gut feel in making these decisions. So I look at how do we weigh the analytical, the data, with the intuitive, perceptual signals and cues. So what I try to do is quantify the unquantifiable. So if we think about gut feel as something that's unquantifiable, how do we try and put a scaffolding or metrics or numbers around that? So what my work looks at is a lot of these, the role of perceptions and signals and micro level factors that influence a lot of these macro level outcomes, like who gets funding for their ventures, how do entrepreneurs decide what businesses to pursue, how do they pivot, how do they come up with ideas, all of these factors around the factors driving what ultimately results. So, was that 2 minutes?
Perfect. No,
All
that's
right,
perfect. I
great.
think it's exactly on time. So, yes, Tina, please, let's continue in the order of the table. So that's perfect.
So thank you. Yeah, and so just actually building on Laura, I think that my work kind of expands on her work in the sense of just bringing that up to a higher level of analysis, where Laura's work, I think, looks more at the individual level or individual entrepreneurs or individual companies. Then my work looks out also at the human factor, but taking that to the level of the industry or the evolution of technological fields. So thinking about industry evolution and how do people perceive, for example, early products, what happens in the very early stages of an industry, and how do people even come to agree that now we have a new industry, and how do people then coalesce around that? And how do these perceptions also influence the strategic opportunities that firms have in these emerging industries? And what are the possibilities that both entrepreneurial and larger firms have for navigating these kind of dynamic industries that take place? Some of my other work also looks at grand challenges. So how do people actually mobilize around a grand challenge? Or what are the difficulties in achieving grand challenges? And again, looking a lot at the human factor of that. What actually stands in the way for achieving a grand challenge like nanotechnology or climate change? Why is it that it's so hard, since even if there's a consensus that we want to achieve the goal, what stands in the way and the more human and social side for actually achieving those goals?
Great. Thank you, Sina. That's perfect. Samina, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Samina Kareem. I'm also a proud engineer. You didn't mention that. So I study corporate strategy and how firms strategically manage their resources and activities to be innovative and thus competitive. And I break that down into two areas. So one is how they internally manage their resources, and that's usually through redeployment or recombination of resources. And one of the key resources that I'll talk about later today is knowledge. And then, of course, firms don't all do things on their own. So predominantly now firms are active in acquisitions and alliances. And so I study how they strategically use those relationships also to be more competitive and innovative. Recently, I'm really interested in two areas. One, looking at internal organization. I do study organization design and redesign, and looking at the future of work. There's an NSF proposal grant that's out there for looking at how AI and machine learning and things are going to actually impact how we all do work in the future, individually and in firms. And so I'm bringing an org design lens to examine that. And the second project I'm really excited about is looking at a particular form of acquisitions, which are acqui-hires. And these are acquisitions not of the traditional firms that have product, but looking to acquire human talent. And so we're seeing over the last 2 decades that this has become even more relevant, and especially the top 5 platform companies are doing this very aggressively to hire talent off the market because they need it to be innovative and competitive.
Thank you, Samina. Tucker, please.
Great. Thank you, Samina and Fernando and everyone here and online. My research, as Fernando had mentioned, is interdisciplinary, so I span industrial mechanical engineering and also management. I particularly look at individuals and teams and how they can transform the product design and development process. And particularly with a focus on how methods and tools like computer-aided design and other information technology can push that forward. One of the things I'm most excited about is our interdisciplinary research that's been going on for 2 years on how AI can transform the very upfront stages of product development. We have received NSF funding and also funding from an impact engineer at Northeastern, and to try to translate that research into actual practice. And I'm excited to say that today, actually, I have to leave early because we're actually launching a prototype platform with an industry partner for a 6-month test to see how AI can transform their upfront concept design process. So we're excited to see that.
Great, thank you, Tiger. Well, it's you see already how diverse and interesting the set of researchers we have here in the table. So let me start and stay with AI, because I think I was telling all of them before you guys came that I was doing an executive education talk last week, and everybody knew about ChatGPT. I mean, when I asked, raise your hand if you tried ChatGPT for something, like 80% of them raised their hand. So this is actually very viral today. So let me start with that, because it's such a good example of an innovation that is really transforming the world, or at least making an impact on how we think about the world. So I'm going to start with that, and maybe I'll direct this first question to Samina, who is our expert in acquisitions and alliances. So what impresses me of ChatGPT is that even though for years and years, decades really, companies like Google and Amazon, they have been investing in AI. It was actually a startup, OpenAI, that really broke ground and became the mass sensation in this. So it's also noticeable that Microsoft, one of the early spotters of this company, and they invested early, and now they invested even more. We're talking about billions of dollars. You have done, Samina, extensive research on alliances and acquisitions. So how did this latest example of a small startup coming in with an innovation, despite the fact that many companies were researching this for a while, and then a large company spotting them and getting to this kind of special relationship, how does it square with your research on alliances and acquisitions? And how do you expect this Microsoft OpenAI relationship to evolve in the future?
Sure, thanks, Fernando. This is, such a current topic and such a hot topic. I'll try to keep this brief. So this mechanism of firms taking minority investments in other organizations that they're interested in is not uncommon, and it's been happening for a long time. And so Microsoft now investing $10 billion over a multiple number of years, what they're given is an exclusive license to use the AI technology. It's interesting because you have to look at any partnership from two perspectives, from both partners. And so from OpenAI's perspective, some are criticizing that, well, it's not really that open anymore. The idea was OpenAI was originally founded as a nonprofit, but then in 2019 they created an arm that is for profit and then took the Microsoft investment. So from their perspective, it's because they need more computing power. And so there was a necessity to then get involved with more capital and more really Microsoft's Azure cloud computing abilities. Now, from Microsoft's perspective, it's, wait a minute, we're way behind when it comes to search and our browser. And this technology hopefully will let us revitalize Bing, our search engine, and Edge, which is their browser, to be seamlessly integrated, to be superior in search and conversation. And in a way, Microsoft has nothing to lose and all to gain because they're so far behind in that compared to Google. But Google has a lot to lose here, right? And for the first time, we're seeing potential competition, which I think is great for us as consumers in this search space. Now, what's really interesting about this, there's some idiosyncrasies about this case, because usually when a larger firm takes a minority investment in a smaller firm, and once they license, if it's something that's a dependable technology that they become also more dependent upon, they'll usually move to acquisition. And so what everyone's wondering now is it going to lead to future acquisition by Microsoft of OpenAI? But whereas in most acquisitions, it's a for-profit firm A acquiring the rest of the for-profit firm B, in this case, the 51% remaining ownership of OpenAI is actually from the nonprofit OpenAI. So it'll be interesting to see this tension come about of whether OpenAI decides to keep their 51% ownership, which is part of the nonprofit mission of having this democratization of AI, or will they have to succumb due to wanting to grow and needing more computing power to letting Microsoft, in essence, acquire them ultimately and go from the 49% to the 51%, which would be formal acquisition. So I'm interested in seeing how this tension plays out between the original kind of mission and goal of OpenAI to then this real need of computing power that they have. And clearly, if this is something that works for Microsoft, they're going to want to acquire. We see this all the time in biotech and big pharma, where there's initially these licensing exclusive arrangements and minority investment, and then they move to full acquisition. But again, the nuance here is that we have a nonprofit that we're working with, not just for profit.
Great, Samina. And for the rest of the panelists, if you want to jump in on these questions also, I mean, I'm directing them to each of you, but then, this is really a question for the panel. I think, the AI is interesting because it has become such a buzzword. We all use AI for everything. And Stina, I know you have done a lot of research on precisely on the use of labels and stuff like that too in nascent industries. I think it's interesting because every time there's uncertainty in new industries, there's a whole bunch of labels that are used, of course, and so what we call AI is really like a combination of different technologies, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, computer vision, many things actually. So you have done research on this evolution of how we call things, and how do you actually see the AI, the use of the AI label today, and how do you expect this AI industry and definition to evolve in the next, say, decade or so? And then perhaps, how does this evolution of what we call AI today compare to other industries you have studied, in terms of how they call things?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence is a very interesting story in general, right? I mean, it's been around for a very long time, and even back in the 1950s, 1960s, there was extreme excitement around artificial intelligence, and a lot of investments, a lot of science that went into the process of trying to commercialize artificial intelligence. And this went on more or less until the 1980s, when all of this hype around AI came crashing down into what's been called the AI winter. Because a lot of the expectations that people had to these systems were not happening. And particularly at the time, the idea of creating a humanoid system. Right, so the goal of artificial intelligence have been always to mirror the human intelligence as the kind of holy grail. After that AI winter, we saw kind of collapse of the industry that in a sense also was very generative because it allowed researchers and companies to focus on much more specific tasks that was not as much about mirroring the entire human cognitive functioning, but focusing in on specific elements of what humans can do. So for example, speech recognition, which is something that I think we've all employed now in our daily lives, was something that was developed out of that kind of crash that came down. And so here we are today, and again, we see an extreme excitement around artificial intelligence and the kind of impact that it's going to have on our world, and especially around ChatGPT. And so I think there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to have a big impact on the way that we conduct businesses, the way that people conduct their everyday lives. However, at the moment, we are probably also at the kind of in the kind of top of a hype cycle where people believe that this technology can transform everything. So we also see this in the beginning of new industries when a new technology comes in, and especially what we call a general purpose technology like artificial intelligence. And that would also be true, for example, for plastics or initially for what I've studied, nanotechnology, which is also general purpose technology that can be applied in very many different settings. For these technologies, we initially always see a very wide kind of explosion of ideas about where could this be useful. And over time, we are going to see that there's going to be a selection of use cases. We're going to find areas in which, yes, it is actually useful, and others where it's not. And I don't think it's clear yet where a technology like ChatGPT is actually going to find its biggest usefulness. I also think what is happening right now, and when people interact with the tool, is that people have a tendency to anthropomorphize new technologies, and particularly when they mirror human capabilities that we've not before seen in a technology. This happened even with the introduction of the automobile, when when something was able to move on its own. To people at the time, that seemed like an animal characteristics, like it seemed humanoid, in a way that today when we look at a car, I don't think any of us kind of attribute an animal characteristics to the ability to move on your own. But because people hadn't seen that capability inside the technology before, it was easy to anthropomorphize it. The same with the introduction of the computer, which is something that I've studied. Early on, when you introduced the computer, people thought about it as a human brain and really saw that a computer was going to be and mirror human capabilities. But today, when we look at the computer, we don't think about the computer as a human. We think about it as a tool, a machine that we interact with and that we use in our daily lives. And I think that the same is going to happen with ChatGPT, that we're going to figure out that, no, even though that when we write to it and responds and it seems human to us now, we're going to learn that, no, it is a machine. And that, yes, we're going to learn that, no, that is actually it's not human. It's a machine that we can begin to use for certain tasks. I think it's very exciting. For example, its ability to help in programming and to speed up different kind of programming tasks, which I could see would be a really interesting use case. Not that it substitutes human beings, but that it will aid and collaborate together with humans. But of course, figuring out how can we and the machine work together as a human and technological system and improve the functionality of organizations and of teams, I think is what is kind of the challenge that is standing before us for us to take real advantage of an exciting technology like ChatGPT.
Perfect. Thank you, Stina. So let me take it a notch up, Laura, because I think, if we think of artificial intelligence, it kind of, in my view, kind of directly talks about your research. Your research is basically, this balance, how people use hard data versus things like intuition and stuff like that. And as you know, artificial intelligence has been used to predict behavior. In fact, three dear colleagues at the University of Toronto wrote this book, Prediction Machines. The idea is that you can predict everything. And in fact, these systems are getting so good that they can predict your behavior better than your husband can in many cases, and same thing for me, which is scary if you think of it. So how do you see your own, ideas from your research evolving in this world in which AI can predict really well? I mean, is intuition as valuable as it was before?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we have this, we have this product, and it's a product that lots of companies are fighting about, right? We've got Google, we've got Microsoft fighting about it, and we've got this product that has lots of applications, lots of use cases, lots of different ways we can use it. And so as we're trying to understand this, as we're trying to figure out how do we use this in our work environments, how do we use this in our personal lives, how do we use this sort of thing, we've been focusing a lot on the output. We've been focusing on what does this give us. So we see lots of different ways that it's been giving us something. And when I think about it in terms of these intuitive processes, in terms of the perceptions that we have about it, we're missing the fact that there's an output and there's the input. And we need to understand more about how we get those sorts of outputs. So the prompts, what we type in, becomes even more important. The way we communicate with these machines, with these algorithms, with this, becomes even more important. If we don't ask the right questions, we don't get the right answers, or we get misinformed information, or we get the wrong types, or it leads us down incorrect paths. So from a business standpoint, I think it's interesting because it'll create a whole new way that we think about jobs, job creation, organizations, just like UI, UX, design things became very, very important. So too do I think it's going to be important that we have people who understand both the input and the output, so that what we're getting out, we know how to slice and dice the data, so that we are not making judgments about data by using priors, by using mental models or schemas that might be leading us in incorrect directions. So we need people who know how to take output and continue to process that in a certain way, or ask additional prompts in a certain way, be able to analyze that. And so I think it's really important that we look at the dimensions of this, both the inputs and the outputs, as well as a second sort of axis around, is this widening or is this narrowing, right? Is it opening up new information, things that we couldn't do before, or is it allowing us to focus our attention? And when we look at all of the different dimensions, that's when we start to be able to do what I do a lot of, which is like, how do we balance the analytical with the intuitive? When do we want to take our gut feel and chuck out the data because we've got the experience or the prototypes or the schemas that'll lead us to the right direction? But when might our intuition be flawed and we need to gather more information to test those or to adapt those in certain ways? And I think the last thing that I'll sort of say is that the reason why this becomes even more apparent and even more salient is because of a little bit of what Stina was mentioning, is that we do have this, it's very much a jolt, right? That we've seen other things that they've come in, we've seen computers come in, we've seen nanotechnology, but this is a big jolt where it's not only from the technology standpoint, but we're seeing like mass consumption. So we are seeing everything from 10-year-old children who are trying this out, to artists that are trying this out for their designs, to extremely technical individuals who are using it for code, it runs the whole gamut. And so there's a lot more in terms of how we think about what does this mean. We don't have the steps that took us to get to product, to use case. There's so many different use cases. So it's really a large kind of hype jolt that took a lot of us by surprise because of how quickly it's the quickest downloaded in history, right? So things like that really change the dynamics of not only what it is, but how people perceive it and how it's used in the future.
Great. And this is actually perfect because now we go to Tucker, and Tucker, you're the only one here that is actually doing research on the use of AI on a particular application, which is product design. And this is super interesting because I'd like you to tell us a little bit, how far have we come with AI in product design? And, there's this traditional fear that every time you talk to people, in a more general audience, the fear of AI is that they might replace us. And, so you are actually doing something very specific on product design. How far are we in terms of, using AI for product design? And do you see, in a near or not so near scenario, the possibility that the AI can design the products without human intervention? Right. What is your view?
Well, that's a great question. And one of the things that I think that we all don't want to be replaced in our jobs, being a professor or a paralegal or a designer. And one of the things that we found when we're out in the field talking to a designer, that they're a little leery about the potential of AI replacing them. I think that we need to change the conversation, that we're not thinking about design replacement, it's design augmentation. So thinking about even us in our normal jobs, if we embed Grammarly in Word and we're having suggestions on sentence structure and wording, we're already seeing augmentation in our daily jobs. If we think about ChatGPT, and particularly in this discussion, if you type in, show me an astronaut riding a horse. An image will come back to you. In product design, what we want is we want a lot of ideas, a lot of novel ideas, and select those. If you can use a prompt to inspire someone to think about an innovative concept, that's a good thing. So one of the things, though, is that from an engineering perspective, is if an image is presented to you, what is drawing from that image? What is in terms of how does it assess customer needs? Are there any functional specifications to that? So one of the things in our research that we're working on is embedding customer needs and prediction into the generation of concepts, using text and images to do that. There's a number of different research avenues to do that. I think that once you do that, then you're starting to ground those concepts that are given to you in more of connecting it more to customer needs, what the concept can ultimately do downstream in the process. One of the things where we are currently, in using AI, for example, is we have generative design. And generative design, even the latest Autodesk Fusion 360, it's very constrained. You might have two holes, and if you're designing a bracket, and you tell the system to optimize for reduction in weight and maximize strength. That's all that it can do now. But in the future, you might be able to have an AI system be able to be able to tell you, if you're designing the exterior of a car, what a customer preference might be on how the overall shape of the car is doing, and may automatically tell you whether or not it would resonate with customers or not. And that's, in research labs, that's what's going on with how to do that. So I think that with ChatGPT, it's showing the potential of giving designers and engineers interesting possibilities to explore, but we're not yet there where the results being given to you have specific data that's really useful for later on in the development process, and that's where we're working to try to do that. So there are challenges that remain.
Great, thank you, Tiger. Okay, at this point, I'd like to open up for questions from the audience. If there are questions, concerns. Yes, how do we do with the microphones? Yeah, do we have mics? Yeah, I think we have mics in the. Yeah, that's it. That's working.
Well, thank you. I had I guess a dean question, but we talked about interdisciplinary research, and business is not the most narrow of disciplines anyway, I don't think. But in looking at the panel, Laura, you work in OB psychology and analytics, and Stina, you work in business and sociology, right? And Tucker with business and engineering, and Samina, you work Air Force in many areas. But how does that? That really intersecting disciplines impact the inform and impact the research that you're doing?
I can take that. I think that for me, I've always sat at the intersection of disciplines. So if you look at my CV, people find it difficult to read it because I have a degree in psychology, then I have a degree in engineering, I'm employed in a business school, and people consider me a sociologist. So it's kind of, I fall between those lines, but I think that it's a great strength because a lot of the groundbreaking work that I've done has been kind of taking ideas and concepts from one discipline and bringing it into the other discipline. And when you then bring those two things together, you see something new. So I bring, for example, even also some things that came from my background in psychology into business or into our understandings about technology and technology evolution. And because of that, I'm able to see these elements that happen in a new light and shed light of something and think in a different way than the people maybe have traditionally done in the business disciplines that I interact with. So in that sense, I think that is where the interdisciplinary kind of work brings these new ideas, and a lot of new things come out. So I've seen that very personal in my own life. I don't know.
Yeah, I can add to that I can add to that as well. I think a lot of it is also organic in the sense that when you start studying something, you start seeing that the answers come in lots of different areas. So when I started studying uncertainty and decision making, one of the things I realized was that a lot of the decisions that are being made are not being made because it's the best product or it's the best technology or even, I'll give a really quick example. So when I was working in investment banking as one of my very first jobs, and I was working on a M&A deal, a mergers and acquisitions deal, and we put together a financial model with different interest rates, different states of the world, all of our assumptions baked in, and we were trying to decide whether we should acquire company A, B, or C. And the model told us that we should acquire company B. And the VP of the bank and the client, as I was presenting it, they're like, this is an amazing model. We love that it has all the assumptions baked in. We love that you have different states of the world. This is a financial model that institutions across the world should be using. And I'm feeling pretty good about myself at this point, except then they paused and they said, there's only one problem. The problem is that we already decided we want to acquire company A. So can you now redo the model to make it say that we should acquire company A because your model says to acquire company B? And this story sort of illustrates the fact that there might be the technology, there might be the data, there might be all of the evidence, but what a lot of us do is we post hoc. When we admit it to ourselves, that's how we make a lot of decisions. We know what it is we wanted to do. We want to do anyways, and then we post hoc find the data to support what it is we wanted to do anyways. And so when I started having these realizations and I started asking these questions, I started realizing, well, yes, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of technical data-driven analytical information, but in order to understand why that is, why is this happening, why are these decisions getting made, you have to bring in the psychology, the heuristics, the decision science, all of these other areas that help you understand that data, the technology, and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of it's organic, that when you're trying to tackle questions like how do we rely on our intuition, what's embedded in our gut feel, you naturally have to bring in these other areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to follow on that, I think that a good interdisciplinary project, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? And I think just to give an example of the project we're working on, we have the Center for Design in CAMD, the College of Arts, Media, and Design, the Business School, and the College of Engineering. The Center for Design brings a perspective of design cognition. How do we think about the theory of how creative people or individuals can be? Of course, engineering brings strong, hard science and developing algorithms and thinking about machine learning and how do we do that more efficiently. And then our side for business is what kind of value is a system providing to an organization? How might it change how designers and engineers may work, and ultimately, does it make the process more effective and more efficient as it's going? And I think that combination, back and forth and collaborating, is really, really effective. And it even goes to our students who also are interdisciplinary PhDs. And one moment they're discussing an algorithm and its output, and the other, how actually can this move our theory of design forward? I think that's a very powerful thing, and I think it can lead to very interesting research and also outcomes as that translates out into the real world.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks a lot. It's a very good question, Emery. It's a challenge for all of us, I think, and we believe this. The innovation field is pretty well equipped because a lot of the theories from innovation actually come from bringing from engineering and bringing from psychology and sociology. So I think we see ourselves a little bit as in that boundary spanning function here in the business school. Other questions, comments, concerns? We have the microphones there. But you have the microphone right there.
If there's no question from the audience, then I will ask my question. This is online.
Just turn it on.
You raised your hand already, then.
Okay, so I know we've talked a lot about ChatGPT and stuff like this, but one other thing that I think everybody here knows is going on is this work from home revolution, whatever you want to call it. So from your perspective, and I know none of you is named Nostradamus, so you don't have to worry too much, but what do you see this doing to places like Silicon Valley or Cambridge or Austin? In other words, does this have any potential? What's the implication of this for all these innovation centers, as we call them? If everybody can now work from home, does that create any challenges for these areas? What's your view on that?
I can tackle that. Actually, your question builds really nicely on this earlier question of interdisciplinary, because the NSF has launched this proposal for studying the future of work. And this is something that they want this study to be interdisciplinary, because I agree with Tucker that the sum is greater than the parts, when we bring interdisciplinary lens to things. And one of the things I think that we're looking at AI and machine learning is how it will affect the future of work. So what does that mean? It's such a vague thing, the future of work. And so I've looked within organizations at how work gets done. And if you make that the most granular, we think of it as how are tasks allocated to people with certain resources to get X done, right? That's maybe like the most basic kind of definition. But now we can think of how are we going to be using, because we have things like artificial intelligence and technology of all different forms to help us do those things, not necessarily in the same physical space as someone else. Right now we can be distributed. We're actually looking, I'm doing a study with several computer scientists and folks in education, and I'm in the business school, so it's very interdisciplinary, looking at how different technologies and tools will help us to actually be distributed organizations. And so in this sense, not only do we we may be remote, but we may also be certainly global. We may be short-term organizations. So work might get done by a team that is together for a short period of time and then fragments, and we find a different set of people to do another set of work. So I think your question, Bunmi, is beyond just us working remote, but even the type of organizations will change, I think, in getting work done. Now, there seemed to be a little bit of an undertone of, is this going to be bad? Does it mean that these clusters that we have, for example, in Silicon Valley or in Boston, are going to be weakened somehow? I actually think of it in an alternative way, which is the upside, that it actually makes the world global. And if anything, these different tools that we have now are going to make us more efficient and hopefully just better at doing what we do. So, there was a time, like you mentioned, Grammarly, like I'm not a good speller. Thank goodness for Word and the, AI that's already incorporated into it. So I think though we may feel threatened sometimes, I think there's a lot of upside. I think a challenge for us as society, though, is I do think jobs will be replaced. But I think as a society, we need to learn to retrain our population, right, towards different tasks and roles.
So, Samina, I think, a question that I'd like to get back to you on this is that, one thing is tasks, but I think, for what we study, all of us, and many of us actually in the room, is that, one thing is to perform a task, and a very different thing is to create and innovate. And so many people are saying, well, for the creation and the innovation, which is really what we care about, you need that, person-to-person interaction, the brainstorming and stuff like that, that we still don't have the tools that would allow us to do that that effectively as it is when we are in person. I mean, and this is a question for the whole panel. What do you think of that? I mean, I do believe in technology, and I think we can do great things even remotely, but still, at least so far, I don't see the same results when you try to innovate and create when we do it online versus, remotely versus in person.
I think we're going to see more of these collaborative tools, though, right? So imagine there was a time we didn't have Google Docs, where we could all be, working on a document at the same time, or Overleaf, right? Whatever your choice of software is. So I think these collaborative tools, right? All of these tasks certainly then need to be interdependent upon one another. And that's what we're looking to see. How can different software tools and AI actually help us to collaborate and link all of those tasks together? But I'll turn it to my co-panelists.
I want to kind of build on this and just say maybe have a more kind of critical view of this new future than you have. And I think there is a tension between kind of short-termism and long-termism, where maybe in the short term an organization, if it becomes completely virtual, can be effective and just complete the tasks, because many tasks can be done. So on a task perspective, we can fulfill tasks in this distributed environment. But in the long term, there are certain things that we are difficult to establish in this virtual environment. And I think it's things like belongingness and organizational identity. That when people work remotely and they are never socializing informally, face-to-face with their colleagues, they lose a sense of belonging to that particular organization. And we have seen actually that rates of depression among people who are working remotely have gone up, because they actually that is actually important for people in their work life to also feel that they're a part of something. So both on a personal level, but then also on the work level, we also know that having face-to-face interactions is something that is very good for minimizing conflicts on teams. So a lot of our work has shown that if you even just meet once on a virtual team, it will even in the long run decrease the amount of conflict that people feel on virtual teams. So there is something special about interacting in real life that I think that we should not forget with the kind of efficiency of having virtual organizations, that we are human beings, and human beings, we are situated, our work is situated inside physical worlds, and that the people working remotely can easily lose a sense of belonging to an organization. And that might mean, for example, if you are a manager and you want all of a sudden your organization to change, they're going to feel less organizational commitment, less identity, and it might be more difficult for the organization to actually implement those change initiatives, because people don't feel they belong to the organization. They might just say, I'm just doing my task. I don't know what these other people are inside of my organization. So in sense, thinking about the short term versus the long term, I think is very important when we think about just implementing and embracing distributed work.
To follow on that, Stina, is the interesting thing is that most of the methods and tools that we teach, let's say as business school professors, are rooted in physical interpersonal interactions, right? So think about design thinking. We're interviewing, we're ideating with Post-its and thinking about that sort of thing. But we don't truly know how we most effectively can work virtually or in a hybrid fashion. And it may be an opportunity that there are some areas that actually that hybrid and virtual work can improve ourselves. And just an example, we are studying the back-end data of a computer-aided design system that allows massive synchronous collaboration like Google Docs. So it's a transformative way that individuals can work virtually. And it actually, our studies show that it actually does fundamentally change how people approach design, and often in certain ways actually better for the creation of new knowledge. So, I think that's an area of study that we can do, and I think that we need to take a critical eye, but there's also a lot of opportunity that we can have with leveraging these tools and systems and new technology in ways that benefit us.
Great. I think we have come out to the end of our time, actually. In fact, we're 1 minute past, so I'm going to end up by thanking the panel again. Laura, Stina, Samina, Tucker. It's just been very interesting. I'd like to thank the audience, actually, and hopefully we have also more in the virtual side of things. Emery, Bhumi, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. Okay, thanks a lot.